Hey everybody, Robot here from Vespa, Motorsport, and ScooterWest.com. If you're looking for parts and accessories for your modern Vespa scooter or vintage, ScooterWest.com, you have everything you need. So let's get right to the subject. So we're going to change a belt on this, the title of the video. How often do you change a belt on a Vespa GTS 250 or 300? So pretty much the large water-cooled freeway legal Vespa that was made from about 2006 all the way up to 2019, 2020. I have separate videos for those in the later. So every 9,000 miles, you're gonna wanna replace the dry belt on it. You don't wanna skip this. If you let this go to about 12,000 miles, especially if you're on the highway, it's likely just gonna snap on you. So it's a good idea to change it at the recommended service interval. These scooters rely pretty heavily on the dry belt to transfer power and for the how the transmission operates. Some of the other things you do, this scooter's at 18,000 miles, and I have this handy worksheet that's based on the same service chart that would be in the owner's manual or the service manual. We'll replace the dry belt. We're gonna go ahead and replace the rollers. They are specific for the engine family and displacement. So we'll do rollers. We'll also replace the guides. I'll talk about that shortly. And lastly, we're going to clean the belt case air filter and clean the pulleys. So that's pretty much what consists of a standard belt job. If you look at my prior videos, I have some super in-depth videos on how to rebuild the pulleys and so on. If you're looking to get more into the transmission or even how to hop them up. A lot of people do transmission upgrades. My recommendation on GTS, just leave it stock. They perform great in my opinion. So before you get started, you're going to need two special tools to successfully complete the job. The best way to buy these is the complete belt service kits, and we have deluxe kits that come with all the tools and everything you need, short of just regular mechanics tools. Tool ETC-IA, that's for holding this clutch on the back, and then you're going to need tool GTS-V, as in Variator, so it holds the actual Variator or the front pulley that's located on the crankshaft. So two pretty important tools you're going to need. And of course, you're going to need the dry belt. So whether it's a 250 or 300, all the way up to 2019, the 843-963 dry belt is the correct one, also known as a 82941R, which is the current part number for that. But Scooter West, we have these available either in the kit or as an individual part. The rollers, usually Piaggio recommends replacing these every 6,000 miles. I tend to find they last the whole 9,000 mile interval. For the 300s, so from 2010 to 2019 would be the 849480. If you got one of the older 250s, a little bit different part number, 842870. And most of these steps are pretty similar for pretty much any modern Vespa. They all have pretty much the same parts under there. There's just little variations, and I have some specific videos for other models, so you may want to look at those. Another thing that's a good idea to replace is these little Variator guides. Again, they're specific for the model. If it's a 250 or 300, they use these green ones. The later 300s have like a black one. So enough of me talking, let's get right to it. So I like to refer to these as the cowl skirt. This is the metal cowl on a Vespa. This is like a skirt, or kind of like how I call that a rocker panel. You want to get it out of the way so you have full access. And typically what coincides with a belt service is also the air filter service, so we're pretty much getting right there. Depending on the year, it's either a Phillips screw or the T25 Torx for this little front screw right here. The later ones have much different design. If you have a GT200, there's going to be another screw in the back. But most of them, you could take a 10mm combination wrench and kind of feel your way around. Under here, there's going to be a nut, I would say, right here. So right behind there is where you'll have a nut that you need to break free. This scooter's got some extra wiring for lights it's got on it. So pull it from the back, start from the rear, and there's going to be 3 rubber plugs that these little things snap into. So I got that out of the way. The next thing, it's a good idea to get the bell cover out of the way. It's going to make the job much, much easier. And depending on the year, sometimes they have Phillips screws for the 3 fasteners that hold the belt cover, or the the air filter. And sometimes there's a nut back here. Not on this one, it threads right into the case, so no issues there. So you got a screw. It looks like the other two are going to be Torx drive. So T30 for both these. That one I can't quite get to. So the screws sometimes want to stay in place. They actually also hold the rear fender, so you can pull them out with a needle nose. They do have a flat washer and a little lock washer, different lengths. So keep that in mind. The longer length one goes towards the front. And at this point, I can shift the air box up, just like that. So now I can easily see all the fasteners for this belt cover. So before we pop the belt cover off, you're gonna wanna remove the clutch nut. And this little clutch cover, you can just carefully pry it with a flat blade screwdriver, and it's got, just like that cowl skirt, it's got rubber plugs that have 3 little pins that engage. So I got a 19mm socket, kind of on a longer wrench here. You could also use 1/2-inch drive, get a little more leverage. So go ahead and put the clutch tool into those 2 pegs. And what that does is locks up the clutch. And it kind of wanted to pop out there, so may need to hold it. I don't have an impact here or a little hammer if you need to give it a couple taps. Probably not the best thing to do for your ratchet. I did put some Loctite on this, so it's got a little bit of friction. Loctite's not really needed for this fastener on the rear, but I guess it can't hurt anything other than it makes it a little more difficult to remove. Let's go ahead and spin the nut off. If this looks pretty knackered, just go ahead and replace it. Go ahead and pull that clutch tool out. And then there's a single washer here that you don't want to lose place of, so go ahead and pull that out. Again, we have that as a replacement part if it's missing. So another thing I like to take off before I remove the belt cover is the air filter for the belt cover. Pretty important function. It keeps like dust and even water out of the belt. I know a lot of people that say, oh, I'm gonna cut my belt cover open so it gets better cooling. And then they go out riding on a rainy day and the belt just slips because this filter kind of has an internal baffle to keep rainwater out of it. Obviously, if you go through a flood, you may have a different issue. So this little cover just pops right off and you can see that little dirty filter in there. It's a foam element. If it's starting to degrade, it's probably time to replace it. And unlike the engine oil air filter that's oiled, the air filter that's oiled, this one you run dry. So it looks like it got a lot of hair in there. I'll try to get it all clean. You can clean it with soapy water. I'll do that off camera, get that hairball off it. You could use like brake parts cleaner, it kind of degrades the foam, or you could just replace it, pretty inexpensive, and then blow it out with compressed air. We'll put that back in the last step. It almost looks like you can get to that nut right there for the drive pulley, but not quite. Give it a little blast so you don't have anything going into your oil. I'm gonna take the oil cap off last. So next we're gonna take all 11 fasteners that hold the belt cover off. I got a nice power ratchet, make the job easy. You could do it with just a 1/4-inch drive socket. Let's go all the way around. So this upper fastener oftentimes will have a ground strap on it, along with a bracket that holds the radiator hose. So it may be a little harder to get out. And in some cases, a little bit longer screw. So keep that in mind, it's got a little bit longer screw for the one that has this bracket and the ground strap on it. So set that screw aside. And the last 2 fasteners hold your brake. The brake hose on the bottom of the motor, same length fasteners. And this one also, in addition to the brake line, has the vent hose for the gearbox on the engine. So it's like a vent for the gears, so it adjusts the pressure in there as needed. So pretty much all the same size screws with the exception of this upper one right here. So now at this point, don't want to start the scooter, we'll pull the dipstick out. Again, if you have a 2020 and later, everything's a little different. So you might want to watch that specific video. This belt cover is powder coated, so it's probably a little harder to get off. So if the belt cover is stuck on there and I can't pull off by hand, the best practice is to use a slide hammer. Not everybody's going to have that. It is possible to get a screwdriver from this end and tap at these various points. So there's two spots here and a spot here and a spot right up here and even down here and one up there to help kind of get the belt cover. You can kind of feel that and hear the hollow noise that's making. The reason this one's so stuck is it is a powder coated belt cover and they tend to be a little stickier, I'd like to say. So that one's starting to come off, but you see how easy this nice little tool works here, but it's not 100% necessary. Getting close. And see the air filter out of the way, the air box, so you could tip the belt cover right off like that. Perfect time to clean inside this belt cover. Make sure this baffle plate is here. That works in conjunction with that cooling fan. And then always feel this bearing, spin it. Seems nice and quiet and it feels really smooth. Like I don't feel any grittiness as I'm turning it. If it feels bad, I have videos on covering, changing the bearings in the belt cover. There's a C-clip right there. So set that aside for now. So some of the other parts you're gonna see in here, this is your centrifugal clutch, and this is the bell. Always remember to put this back on. We're gonna clean this part up. Looking at my clutch shoes right here, you look at that friction material right there. I would say this is about half worn at 18,000 miles. I'd say by 36, 40,000 miles, you definitely need to replace it. Of course, it completely depends on the kind of riding you do, but once this is down to the last millimeter of thickness from that metal right there, you know, aluminum of the clutch to the outside of that, I guess, leading edge or the trailing edge, I think that's whatever the thinnest part, once that's down to a millimeter, time to replace a clutch. Here's your pulleys for the drive right here. Keep in mind these pulleys do wear. I'll show you that. 18,000 miles, they don't necessarily need to be replaced, but let's say probably at the same time the clutch needs to be replaced at 36, 40, it may be a good idea to replace all those parts to regain some of your performance. And I'll show you how to use this tool right here. So this is a Bizzetti tool. It's made in Italy, and there is a factory tool that's a little more difficult to use, a little more has a little more substance to it, I guess, because it's, you know, a tool designed for everyday use. This is more of an occasional do-it-yourself kind of tool. So it includes a screw, a washer, and this spacer right here. And you see those two teeth right there? So in order to use the tool, you're gonna want to turn the pulley to the approximate position where this tool lines up with this hole. So I have those two little pegs engaged, and we'll start threading it in right now. And you can kind of see it kind of wants to hold out of the way. And of course, for removing this pulley, pretty critical on the torque when we reinstall it, but it is possible to just use an impact to remove this, and could use a 5mm wrench, or even the Torx works, I find. So go ahead and tighten that up. Pretty important you have it tight. So you got that tool in there. Put the 19mm socket, same as what we use for that clutch center nut. And see how it locks it in place? That pulley, otherwise you're just going to be turning the crankshaft. Again, there's a little bit of Loctite on this. So go ahead and pull that nut off. It's actually the same size nut as the rear, so Not a problem if you get it mixed up with that nut that goes on that shaft right there. Get the tool out of the way. And then there's a couple washers. There's this thick washer, and there's a thin washer. The pulley pulls off, and then a really thin washer. So make sure you know the order, set them down in order. They've got different size holes in them. And at this point, you see the dry belt. The dry belt looks intact and good, but it's got 9,000 miles on it. Time to throw it away is my thought on it. You could go in there and inspect them. I've seen belts last less, especially if the scooter's used at high speed all the time. And I have seen belts last as long as like 15,000, 18,000 miles on scooters that never are exposed to high temperature, long distance, high speed riding. I feel like it's the high speed is what ends up taking the life off the belt. Another thing you can check is as they age, they start cracking on the inner parts of it. And I can see there's some heat that's been exposed to this. It's got like a Kevlar band on it. But again, maybe good for a spare, but not worth using. Another thing to check is this idler pulley. That thing's got a little wobble to it, but I think it's still good. It's still smooth. It's more about the bearing in the center. The belt doesn't really ride on that all that much. The driven pulley and clutch just pulls right off. I also like to flip it around on the shaft here, and this is how you can listen to the bearing. Nice and smooth, no noise coming out of that bearing. So I think this is in good shape, especially 18,000 miles. And next we'll go ahead and pull the Variator off, or the movable drive pulley as they sometimes call it. So I typically hold this back, pull the boss out like that. It can go either direction, but I tend to want to keep it in the same direction it was removed. And then I tip the whole pulley. I'm tipping it back because otherwise those rollers just fall right out. And when you do that, the rollers all stay in place. And yeah, those rollers are looking a little shot. There's not huge flat spots, but they've definitely are kind of at their service life. And then these are the little guides. They tend to wear out as well. So they go ahead and throw those all away. And oftentimes you can see how much they start opening up. See how wide those are? So the customers complained the transmission was a little bit noisy, and it's because those have a lot of slop versus a brand new one that fits not tight, but it's got much less slop on those pegs. Those are designed to wear out. That's the way they're engineered. And sometimes this pulley won't come off. You could use that handy little slide hammer. Another option is there's some metal in here. You could kind of pry in a couple different spots and just kind of work the pulley off. So the splines look like they're in great shape, which is important as long as the transmissions never come loose. This rather expensive timing cover and main seal, there's no leaks whatsoever. It's perfectly dry in there. If there's oil leaks in there, probably don't want to go any further. You probably want to service that seal or replace it and figure out why you have an oil leak in there. So the next step is clean all these parts. So we're going to go dispose of these rollers. Don't need those anymore. But all these pulleys here and parts, we're going to clean them. Typically I clean them in a parts washer, which we have here in the shop, but I'm going to show you how to do it, the do-it-yourself method of cleaning these parts here. So to set up a makeshift parts cleaning basin, you have some little, like this is the bottom of a 5-gallon barrel or an oil pan. You're going to need like a can of brake parts cleaner, and it's nice to have some paper towels. And some of the surfaces we need to deglaze. So I got 80 grit sandpaper or emery cloth. And we'll start with the clutch bell because you don't want this part contaminated. Good idea that the deglaze the inside. You don't need to get too crazy with it. I don't see too many grooves. These clutch bells usually last quite a long time. I don't really see too many issues with them. On the GTS, you know, some of the smaller bikes will overheat the clutch really easily. This one's gotten hot a little bit. I see some purple and blue in it, but pretty much just give it a scuff You see all that dust that drops out? I'm wearing safety glasses, by the way, here. And just go ahead and clean all that dust out. Try not to sniff those fumes. And you can use either compressed air, which is probably not the best for your lungs because you'll be blowing all this stuff around. But better yet, just take a nice fresh paper towel and clean it. And you see that kind of cross-hatching with what I scuffed up. So the next critical part to clean is this driven pulley. These clutch shoes, usually I like to give them just a little scuff to break the glaze off them. Again, no need to replace this clutch, still has probably half its life remaining on it. And again, there's some special tools that you'll need to disassemble this, or if you're in the area, my service department will take it apart and we can overhaul this for you with all the factory tools. So gave that a little cleaning. Another spot to check, it didn't break a belt, fortunately, because once you break a belt, you probably do want to rebuild this, it's my thought. And the way you open this up is I'm using my palms and I'm rotating it clockwise and kind of pulling up, and you can see that opens up. So just like that. It's a pretty tricky motion. You have to have pretty strong hand strength to open these up. And the last thing is just on the outer, it's not too critical because they sometimes slip on the initial. You could just break the glaze on the outer part of the pulley. Obviously, if we rebuilt it, we'd probably break that glaze off the aluminum all the way in the pulley here. So kind of just go all the way around. That emerald cloth, if I could say it correctly. In here, sometimes you'll pack some new grease. The grease looks pretty good. Probably could actually use a little bit, so I'll put a little bit of Maxima grease in there. But for right now, I want to keep my finger in there so I don't contaminate anything with what I'm going to clean off. So again, go all the way around. Mainly in the clutch, that's where it builds up the dust, and that's what causes some chatter and undesirable transmission operation there. So you can see how dirty that is. And the regular brake cleaner, it just evaporates on its own as well. And the idea is just a liquid that takes away any of the contaminants that we want to remove. You can certainly clean this backside, not really critical. So we're going to put a little bit of grease in here, just a small amount since we're not rebuilding it. Make sure you don't get grease on any other part of this system because the rest of it operates dry. If there's any grease on it, you're going to have a clutch chattering and slipping, or the belt will slip. And to show you how little grease I'm going to put on there, so just one kind of index finger in there, and then just put a little bit in there, mainly the needle bearing. And it kind of, with the centrifugal forces, that small amount of grease will kind of distribute through the guide pins and all that. But again, higher mileage, or if you have other issues, snap belt, you'd probably want to rebuild this assembly here. The last part we're going to clean is the Variator. And again, deglaze this surface. It looks really even. I don't see any grooves in it. You know, sometimes as they wear, if you're on the highway all the time, they'll kind of wear at the very outer section. But this scooter looks like it's used at like lots of different speeds, so it's kind of has a nice even wear to it, which is a good thing. And again, clean out that bronze bushing. You want to get everything as clean as you can inside here, because you know those the nylon surface of the rollers, if they have abrasive residues, they tend to want to wear out quicker. So again, brand new rag. Wipe it all out, and it looks pretty clean to me. Clean the boss. Sometimes you don't even need to, you can just leave it in a paper towel. Don't need to sand this or anything. It's a machined hardened piece here. So kind of just wipe the residue off this. See how this residue kind of building up, and that causes like kind of a stiction or issue with the Variator as well, as it gets more residue, and it should slide in there real smooth. There's a small amount of free play, which is normal, but eventually this does wear out and you do need to replace it. And the last part to clean is this ramp plate, as they call it. And probably not even gonna use this spray here. And the very, very last part is the fixed drive pulley. Doesn't really need cleaning. They always tend to stay clean. So, but just a little scuff with your sandpaper and give it a little dusting with a clean glove. So now it's time to start reassembling the transmission. So it's pretty much in the reverse orders. We'll start with the correct size roller weights. These are the OEM part. They tend to kind of wear the longest. There are other things like sliders and all that. I don't know, the OEM stuff seems to last long and is good bang for the buck. So there's two sides of these rollers. There's an open side and a closed side, as I like to call it. So open clockwise. So the open side keeps on facing clockwise. So just go all the way around and don't mix up that order because they will wear. Pretty odd if you don't have them installed in that correct orientation. And this Variator still is in good shape. There's not much free play, like jiggle. They should jiggle a little bit. And then next we'll go ahead and put these little guides on this ramp plate. And they won't go on that direction. They only go on one direction. So pretty difficult to mess that one up. And then you just drop this right in here. You can see this is going to fit much nicer. The transmission is going to be much quieter now that there's only a little bit of free play. So you can see, you can kind of hear it knock a little bit, but it wasn't like those old parts. And see, I'm holding that just like that so it doesn't fall apart. The rollers are all in there. Next step is just go right onto the transmission shaft, and I'm holding it like a kind of like a taco. And go ahead and just push the whole entire Variator on. And then go ahead and take your boss right here and install this part. No grease or anything. It's all designed to be self-lubricated by that sintered bronze bushing in there. So next, take your brand new drive belt, and you see some writing on the drive belt. That's actually an arrow, and you want to have it pointing towards the counterclockwise because the motor, the crankshaft turns this direction right here if you're facing it from the side I'm on, which is the left side here. So the arrow kind of points towards the front of the motor. We have our clutch right here, and with that arrow continuing the face kind of forward at the top of the clutch. I'm going to get the belt set in there. You may need to have two people help you out with this if you don't have the hand strength, but I'm twisting the pulley, getting my hands in there, twisting, and then I just used another hand to shove the belt about halfway down the pulley. And I'm just holding the belt and it's keeping this Variator, this driven pulley partly open. So at this point, I got the grease on that needle bearing. Carefully slide that onto the driven pulley shaft there. And you see how the belt's just settled right there? That's perfect. You don't want it right up against this boss just yet. So before we go any further, I have seen people forget to put this on. So go ahead and slide that on. Take your thin, larger hole washer, put that on right there. Take your fixed half driven pulley. We'll kind of have that facing like such right there. Take the flat washer that's thinner. That's a larger thin washer. And then you have the more critical washer. And it's got like a dome to it, like this shape. You can see it's kind of concave this way. So that dome faces out. I think it's called a Belleville washer, if I recall. You could put a little dot of Loctite's, kind of the added measure, just in case you don't get the torque right. They're very rare that they come loose on these GTSs. The 200 GTs had a tendency to want to loosen up. So at this point, I don't even have the tool on there yet, but and we'll turn. And see how the belt's all floating in there? That's perfect. That's what you want, because you do not want to be pinching the belt. And right now it's pretty tight. You know, short of the thing. But you see how the belt doesn't even want to turn? That's perfect. The moment you start the scooter, it will engage everything and tension the belt. So don't even be worried about that. The more important thing is we want to torque this nut right here. So let's get that facing like that. Be careful turning the motor over. Sometimes it will want to shoot the engine oil over from the pumping action of the piston. So we'll get that just kind of, let's see, get that lined up and started. And it's a little, sometimes hard to turn the motor in reverse like that because you're going against the starter clutch. And we'll get those little pegs all lined up. And kind of get this whole jig. And I'm just kind of tightening it by hand, and then I'm gonna get a torque wrench in there. So I have that 19mm socket and a torque wrench that goes up to 100 foot-pounds. So we're gonna set this to 45 foot-pounds, which corresponds to about, I would say about 60 newton meters. And we're gonna go ahead and tighten this until the torque wrench clicks. And that's all you need. Pull that tool out of the way. We're done with this Variator holding tool. Could clean the belt cover a little bit more, but it's looking fine. So go ahead and drop that over the oil filler and then just tip the belt cover right on. There's 2 dowel pins in this corner and this corner right here that you need to line up. So before you go any further, we'll go ahead and put the dipstick back in. Make sure the belt cover is all the way seated, otherwise you'll never get this threaded in. Just want to do it, just make sure I don't drop any debris into the oil fill. I'll probably check it again. We're going to start with that one screw that's a little bit longer in this upper corner right here, where there's the coolant hose and this ground strap. So find your one longer screw, go ahead and send that right through. And if you're looking for a torque for these, about 7.5 foot-pounds is where you want to go with it. I'm going to just carefully tighten that one, and then I'm going to move over to the corner over here. And those are the 2 with the dowels, so kind of want to make sure they're all tight. And then next I'll move on to the ones with the brackets down here, because it's pretty easy to forget about these little brackets. Let's get the screw started. And probably for the best feel, if you're not familiar with using power tools, you go to town with the power tools and you could just so easily strip out the fasteners or the aluminum threads in the engine case. So a hand tool, you're gonna get a lot better feel. So I may be using a power tool here, but if you're looking for the utmost in accuracy and getting these tightened without cross-threading them, probably best not to use a tool like this, but I like speeding things up, and we'll get those all tightened. All right, so go ahead and put that little washer in here. I'm not gonna bother with any Loctite. And a little tip is you just turn the wheel backwards and it will tighten that, not all the way. And then we're gonna set this to 30 foot-pounds. This corresponds to about 42 newton meters there. Put that clutch holding tool. Sometimes you want to rotate the wheel and kind of hold the tool while we tighten this. So 30 foot-pounds, that's all you need. Put the little cover on. Normally this would be like a chrome cover for this, but somebody painted that black. Looks pretty cool. All right, so put the little air filter back in place. Again, if it's deteriorating or anything, I just replace it, really inexpensive part, and put this little cover back on. And these are kind of like plastic thread forming screws. So typically you want to go backwards with them just a little bit so they catch the existing cut threads. So you kind of feel a snap when they go backwards, and then start threading them in. And that's how you put that all back together. So next, the air filter box. Of course, is the perfect time to now service the air filter. So you have the screw right here, and depending on the year, sometimes it could be Phillips or Torex. In some cases, they even have a nut on the backside. But I'm gonna get them all started because sometimes the air filter box can be a little tricky. And in some cases, you gotta move the rear fender around to get everything to line up, because these fasteners serve two purposes. They hold the air filter box. Sometimes they're missing or they come loose, I've seen that. And they also hold the rear inner fender, which keeps all the rain and mud out of the motors. So, there we go. Nice thing is the original factory screws have like a self-starter on them. So they usually are a little easier to use than a regular generic screw. And there we go. They're all started with no issues. And sometimes the clips are getting a little worn, and if that's the case, sometimes you could put a little grease on the tip of the screw, and that actually sometimes helps it along too, is what I find. It's a lot smoother now. There we go, no problems there. Perfect opportunity again to go ahead and service the air filter. There's some quick nuts up there, and then there's screws throughout, very much like this little plastic cover. Pretty much the same idea, except for you have an oiled air filter element. You can check out a video on doing the air filter alone. If you could do the belt job, you could certainly change the air filter. It's pretty simple. I just recommend replacing it with the original Piaggio premium air filters already oiled and ready to be installed. So that's gonna be your best solution. So this little skirt here is a little more tricky to install. So the scooter's got the optional floor mat. We're gonna tip that out of the way. So you start from the front. There's these two little engagement points that you gotta push in. See how I got that seam all perfect? And then we'll go ahead and push the pegs in. And if you have trouble with this, again, a little grease sometimes will help you on those pegs, and then we'll get that this seam right here to line up. And I'm just using my palm to give it a nice technical tap, as I like to call it. Pretty much put that fastener back here, get the wrench on it, and then that screw in the front, and you're pretty much done. Take it easy on the first test ride, make sure the belt's not slipping. If everything's good, transmission should be a little quieter and smoother than what it was before. It's usually noticeable when you put a new belt and clean everything out. All right, so we got these 4 checks on our several checks of the factory service schedule. Got the oil change out of the way and the drive belt. And that's pretty much it. As for tools, you can see you need a fairly comprehensive set of mechanics tools, including something like a torque wrench, 2 of those special tools, Torex drivers, and more. You probably watched the whole video before you started the job, so you probably have a good idea of what tools you need. But I'll see you on the next one. Robot here from Vespa Motorsport.